It is astonishing that I have been on YouTube for just about 10 years and I have never once reviewed The Batman. Not the movie, the cartoon of the same name that came out in 2004. Though the movie is also a masterpiece, but I'm not here for that right now. It is so shocking that I never covered The Batman up to this point because this was absolutely one of my favorite shows as a kid. Hard to say it was the number one, I had a lot of those, but whenever I was in a Batman mood, I was obsessed with this series. Around 2009, I had the DVDs for every season and I would play those discs religiously. Watch during the day, watch while playing video games, watch to fall asleep to, catch on Boomerang reruns, and of course I watched it a lot as it was first coming out 20 years ago. As a kid, I freaking loved The Batman. Naturally, I've seen every episode multiple times, but I realized I haven't watched it in a long time now. It's been like 12 or 13 years since I last gave the show any attention, so I was more than glad to do a revisit. This was also a big request alongside Teen Titans, which I did a few months back, so now it's The Batman's turn. The Batman had the incredibly difficult task of being the show that followed the legendary Batman the Animated Series. BTAS was a genre-busting classic, one of the most important animated shows ever produced. It was iconic, invented new characters that became DC mainstays, reinvented old ones, and pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible in animated TV storytelling. Naturally, it's a tough act to follow. This show's producers, Dwayne Capizzi, Michael Goguen, and art director Jeff Matsuda of Jackie Chan Adventures fame simply wanted to do something different from BTAS and present Batman in a new way for a new audience. For 2000s kids like me, it absolutely worked. Their show ran for 5 seasons on Kids WB and Cartoon Network, but if you were online in the 2000s and into the 2010s, you'd know that many older Batman fans, especially ones who grew up with Batman the Animated Series, thought this show was bad. Different without being better or interesting. It just wasn't what they were looking for. I always hated seeing this show get bashed online, but naturally, towards the start of the current decade, I started seeing video essays pop up in my recommended feed from people my age about how good this show was. Fancy that. So now it's my time to throw my hat in the ring and talk about why I think this show is so awesome and how it managed to be different from BTAS and why it works, while not taking anything away from the amazing work that had the tough act of following. Episode 1 excellently conveys what kind of Batman world this is. The opening scene shows Batman taking down mob boss Rupert Thorne in an action scene that showcases how the Dark Knight at this point is still kind of a myth, and when he does show up, he pulls off seemingly impossible feats.
How'd you do that? I'm the Batman.
Crime in Gotham is at a historic low because the Batman has put away mobster after mobster. This night being the 3rd anniversary of his first becoming Batman, Alfred having prepared a cake to celebrate. But the Batman's rising infamy has forced Police Chief Rojas's hand. He wants the Batman stopped and puts Detective Ethan Bennett in charge of the hunt alongside his new partner Ellen Yin. But the activity of Batman has inspired a new kind of criminal. Arkham Asylum is taken over by the Joker, making his first appearance, and is the kind of person this Batman has never dealt with before. The episode appropriately shows him stunned by one of Joker's victims. The rest of the episode showing Batman's first clash with Joker, and Batman stopping his plan of popping a balloon of Joker gas all over Gotham. It's a pretty simple first episode, but I really like it. They stated in the behind the scenes that when conceptualizing what this series was going to be about, they thought a natural way to separate it from BTAS was by setting it at a different point in Batman's career. Batman the Animated Series showed flashbacks of Batman's earlier days, but the show just jumped right into the story with a fully fleshed out Batman arguably at his peak. He met a lot of his villains for the first time in the show, but others like Joker were people he had already been dealing with for a while off screen. But this show focuses on the inexperience of this Batman. Not to say he's not good at his job, he's an absolute beast in fact, but that he's early on in his career, meaning he's not the perfect detective that BTAS Batman was. He relies on brawling and gadgets a lot more often. Episode plots are usually resolved by Batman inventing a tool that saves the day. This is another thing the show does to feel distinct from Batman the Animated Series. That show was set in the 90s and was like a fusion of the 90s and the 40s. The technology people used was that of the 90s, but the aesthetic and clothes were more 40s. And then, Batman's technology had a retro-futurism vibe to it. This Batman is very 21st century. His gadgets and tools are sleek and stylish, all having uniform black and blue metallic designs. And his car can drive itself and connects to Bruce's personal tunnel system across the entire city. Like, he just has fake dumpsters set up that he can drive through and into the Batcave all across town. Batman is an urban myth at this point, so there's no bat signal. He hears about crimes via a tool called the Batwave that is linked to the police dispatch. It makes a cool sound when it goes off. But it's not just the aesthetics that are sleek here. The action scenes are too. Like Teen Titans, the Batman was taking inspiration from anime to frame a lot of its action scenes, with dynamic and fast-paced movement and speed lines in the foregrounds and backgrounds to heighten the motion. The show just has the sickest aura a Batman series has ever had. Just look at the intro. The music is dark and gothic, and it makes Batman look like the coolest dude alive. This intro is just clips from the first few episodes and some concept art thrown into the villains, but the way it's edited is just raw as fuck. In the episodes, they just make what could be mundane scenes feel stylish to watch, like most episodes giving Batman a suit-up scene that were some of my favorite parts. Whenever I wear gloves, I put them on equally dramatically because it reminds me of this show, not gonna lie. As always, what it takes to bring a cartoon to life isn't just cool artwork, though. You also need talented voice work, and this series delivers. Batman and Bruce Wayne are played by Rino Romano, who does an excellent job sounding like a young 21st century guy. He feels down to earth as Bruce Wayne both when he's doing the rich guy act and when he's his normal self. Then, as Batman, he sounds cool and confident and collected. Fun fact, the voice actor also played Spider-Man in the PlayStation 1 games, and I thought he was good at that too.
A Spider-Man made off with Octavius' new invention, but not the Spider-Man, not me. Somebody's framed me. Why? I don't know yet. For someone who gets his kicks scorching tech companies, hard to believe you've never heard of them. You're done, Firefly. Cooked.
Shows range because Batman and Spider-Man are very different characters. Alfred is voiced by Alistair Duncan, who also played Senator Armstrong in Metal Gear Rising and Mimir in God of War 2018 and God of War Ragnarok. He's a really talented dude just going off that list alone, but he's also awesome as Alfred. I love the BTAS Alfred, but I think this might be my favorite cartoon depiction of him since he's just got a really good voice and has a lot of personality. Alfred is often a background character in some Batman shows, but this series makes him a main character in a lot of plots, giving him the chance to show different sides of his personality, like how he encourages Bruce to maintain a social life to cover for the Batman, but also because he really wants Bruce to have a normal life. But he's also good at helping Batman anyway. And he has his own conflicts too, like how his grandfather was the butler of the Penguin's family and their mistreatment gives him a grudge against Penguin. He's just a really fleshed out Alfred. Ethan Bennett and Ellen Yin are some of my favorite new characters from this series. Ethan Bennett is Bruce's best friend from high school. The first episode reveals this in a cool, dramatic way. Bennett spots the Batman, and the next time you see him is this scene.
Who is it, Alfred?
The police. Yo, Bruce!
Hey, Ethan.
All his scenes in Season 1 show that Ethan is a likable dude who believes in stopping bad guys and really thinks the Batman is on the right side but is forced to hunt him down for the sake of his job. It also puts Bruce Wayne in a tough spot because of his being Batman in secret, knowing the pressure it puts on Ethan. Yin is a good counterbalance to Bennett. Her name is based on Ellen Yindel from the Dark Knight Returns novel who wanted to take down Batman, but she's an original character here. She believes in law by the book and therefore wants Batman taken down at all costs. Her arc over the first season is realizing how important Batman actually is now that the freaks are running all over Gotham City. And speaking of which, to counteract this more physical Batman, you have some of his most physical opponents. Jeff Matsuda correctly pointed this out. When doing a different take on Batman, you want to keep him pretty familiar, but the villains are open season on doing different stuff. This Joker, for example, is very different from previous ones. As opposed to being a gangster with a clown look, this one leans fully into the insane element. His hair is wild, he doesn't wear shoes, and in his first two appearances, he wears a straitjacket. He's excellently played by Kevin Michael Richardson, one of the most prolific voiceover actors, and he brings a unique energy to Joker that stands out compared to Mark Hamill's take.
The Batman? What if I hadn't been decent?
You're never decent, Joker. Why bother adding a stand-in to your card collection instead of me?
To drive you batty, of course.
But as I was saying, this version of the Joker frequently engages in fisticuffs with the Dark Knight. Often, Joker is a mental threat to Batman more than a physical one, but this Joker is both, since he pulls out wild and unpredictable ninja moves himself. It makes fight scenes fun to watch with pretty much every villain, since they can all go toe-to-toe with Batman while still challenging him in the ways they usually are meant to. Joker trying to push Batman to the edge of sanity as always, but just happens to be super strong as well. Though, rewatching this now, it's funny how this Joker seems like a big leap from what had been done before, but since the majority of Jokers we see these days are some kind of alternative take or serial killer spun off from Heath Ledger's Joker, this one feels a lot more familiar and classic by comparison than it did 20 years ago. But moving along, episode 2 focuses on Batman's most physical villain, Bane. The basic rundown here is that some mob bosses hire Bane to kill Batman, and he beats Batman after one fight, and Batman makes a robot suit to defeat him, and does. But what I thought was most interesting about this episode is that I realized why, for me, Bane is kind of an ineffectual villain in a lot of things he's in, this being no different. I think he looks cool. His face is fully covered before he uses venom and then becomes red and black with the yellow tubes when he's unleashed. It looks good. But as stated, Bane is kinda lame when he's in a kid's show. Bane is one of the most iconic Batman villains these days, but I think he only works as an event character. His whole thing in the comics was crafting the perfect strategy to beat Batman physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then he was actually able to do it, and that issue had changed the status quo of the comics for a long time. That's how you do Bane correctly. Even in a version as different as The Dark Knight Rises, it still did it right, where Batman getting beat was a big deal. I remember being in the theater when that movie came out. You could hear a pin drop during that fight scene, even with the mid-fight choreography those movies had. Now, I always hated how lucky the eventual win felt at the end of the movie though, but this isn't a review of The Dark Knight Rises. In a kid's cartoon, Batman can't really lose too badly, so he beats Bane every time in BTAS, what few times he showed up that is, and here, he's hired to kill Batman and decides to leave him alive for basically no reason, giving Batman the chance to come back and discover Bane's weakness to electricity, turning him into one of the weakest villains in the whole show every time he appears again. Despite that, the episode is still good and has great moments, like Alfred being really against Batman going out to fight Bane again.
But know that if you intend to face this Bane again, sir, you may need to find another butler/physician/getaway driver.
I understand, Alfred.
Oh, very well then. Let's get to work, shall we?
Just being worried for his safety and getting flashbacks to the last time he had to do an emergency pickup for Bruce, when his parents died. The early episodes all alluding to that backstory, but never spend a whole episode on it though, since they probably figured we all already knew. So, I like this episode, I just think Bane is kind of a lame villain a lot of the time. Fun fact about this episode though is that I was really confused why it was listed as the third episode on the Blu-ray, and then I researched that it was the third episode aired, but then I could have sworn this was the second episode. So I did some digging and found out that it was listed as episode 2 on the season 1 DVD from 2006. So, since I was so addicted to those DVDs, I assumed that was the order, but I'm still calling it episode 2 because fuck it, it's my video. It's episode 2 in my heart. The next 2 episodes introduce Penguin and Catwoman. What stands out the most about their introductions is that these two are also ninja masters alongside Batman. The crew just thought it would be a surprising development to see Penguin just pull out flip kicks and all that. Penguin and Catwoman do have their own motivations. Penguin wants to restore the Cobblepot family name to what it once was and seeks to do so by stealing lots of money. Catwoman is super rich and steals for the thrill of the chase. But those motivations are pretty simple. This isn't the kind of series where you'd expect to see an episode about Catwoman's animal rights activism like you might on the animated series, because her fighting with and alongside Batman and generally causing him grief like stealing his utility belt is the kind of storytelling this show prefers to do, while having moments for the core cast members along the way, like the aforementioned dynamic between Alfred and Penguin, and then seeing Ethan and Yin keep trying and failing to catch Batman during these episodes. But once more, the show's agenda is about aura farming and doing it with a cast of lovable heroes and detestable villains. So yeah, Penguin has ninja kabuki guards and fights toe-to-toe with Batman. And yeah, Batman and Catwoman tag team against an army of ninjas. Why? Because it looks pretty dope. That focus on style above everything else can be seen most with Man-Bat and Mr. Freeze in the following 2 episodes. Man-Bat isn't trying to evolve humanity or science like he was in the previous show. He just turns himself into a mutant bat because Batman looks cool and wants a fraction of that power. It's not deep in the slightest, but it's an engaging episode because of its action scenes and cool gadgets. The Nolan movies and the Arkham games have treated Batman gliding with his cape as a given, so I feel like we're all kind of conditioned for that to be normal, but then you rewatch things that came before then, and you see that a lot of the time, Batman would get around in the air on gliders and wingsuits and stuff. In the Man-Bat episode, he develops more of a jetpack, but still. I'm just admiring the fact that this came out before Batman practically flying with his cape was a normal thing. The episode is also well done for how it tells that basic story. Kirk Langstrom, Man-Bat, works at Wayne Industries, so the breadcrumbs that Ethan and Yin follow to Langstrom hoping to find Batman puts Bruce at risk of getting caught. That character drama carries you through the already exciting episode. And then Mr. Freeze is another striking case. They said it themselves. His episode in Batman the Animated Series was and is untouchable. They added tragic complexity to the character that was never before seen, and has become the default take on Mr. Freeze ever since. They didn't even want to attempt to outdo or redo it. So what would be cool? What if, instead of having an ice gun, Mr. Freeze was a guy who got mutated in an accident into a creature of pure ice with a striking design? And that's what you get. His backstory makes Batman feel slightly responsible for his current predicament, but it's not a super big element. It just looks sick when Batman gets this action figure ready, all-white anti-Freeze suit with the flame guns, while he and Freeze trade ice puns like it's Batman and Robin.
We both know you put yourself on ice. I'm here to bring on the thaw.
And I mean that seriously. I don't know what to say, this show just makes something that could be totally corny and something else feel absolutely sick when watching because the fights just look that good. And have memorable moments like when Batman beats Freeze by blasting him with the Batmobile's exhaust. Now, none of that is to say the series never tries to tell more personal stories with its characters, because the next crop of episodes do, like The Big Heat where Batman meets Firefly for the first time. I always loved this show's design for him. The yellow mask and highlights with the black suit just look really cool, especially compared to his all-gray animated universe or Arkhamverse designs. Firefly is a corporate saboteur working for GothCorp, a rival company to Wayne Industries. Thanks to GothCorp, Wayne Industries lost out on sponsoring the Children's Hospital. The writers make it personal for Bruce since this was his father's cause, and he's losing it because of his public persona, the persona he needs to keep up to cover for Batman. And he also loses his chance to make his case to the city council because he was knocked out as Batman the previous night. It just shows how much havoc the Crusade is putting on Bruce Wayne's life, and you really feel for him. But, as Batman, he proves Firefly is wrecking companies on behalf of GothCorp, which gets Wayne Industries the contract back. So Batman solves both his and Bruce Wayne's problems. So that was a nice personal story. Bonus points because the mayor of Gotham in this episode was voiced by Adam West, the original TV Batman of the 60s.
Bruce, your father would be proud of you if he were here today.
Scarface's debut episode also carried a dilemma for Bruce Wayne. Alfred tries setting him up online with a nice woman, but Batman realizes that the villain, Arnold Wesker, and his puppet Scarface are a split personality for Wesker. He concludes that he also has a darker side, Batman. He's not willing to let go of that, and since nobody can know about his being Batman, he sends Alfred to cancel the date and goes back to crime fighting. It's a kinda sad ending about Batman and his obsessive nature. It's like he learns a lesson from the episode's antagonist, but the one that drives him deeper into his personal crusade. Batman's villains mirroring his obsessive nature is a recurring theme across his whole rogues gallery. He just chooses to put that energy towards something positive, unlike his enemies. The episode where he faces off against Cluemaster is a demonstration of that. As a boy, Cluemaster was a genius on this trivia TV show, but he was consumed by jealousy over the time he lost in front of the entire crowd and everyone watching at home, and spent ages trying to figure out how to get back at the people he perceived as doing him wrong. Which is petty and ridiculous, whereas Batman took his tragic childhood moment and used it as the ultimate fuel for doing good things. And the way Batman schools him is absolutely fantastic.
Is there anything the great Arthur Brown doesn't know?
You'll find out.
Name the true identity of the Batman.
Trick question, ask another.
You said I could ask anything.
And I also thought it was funny that part where Cluemaster was like,
At this point in the show, we would usually break for a word from our sponsor. Don't you wish?
and that is a natural segue in how this video is brought to you by absolutely nothing. Figured I'd go for that gag for the third time on my channel, no big deal. But then I like how this episode ends too. Alfred points out that Bruce never really stopped to enjoy the fun parts of childhood, and at the end he brings a chessboard for him and Alfred to play together. Another tiny moment for them to bond that makes this one of my favorite Batman-Alfred dynamics. Episodes 10 and 11 bring Joker and Penguin back, respectively. In episode 10, I like how this is the first time we see how Joker can outsmart Batman throughout, as he's capturing everyone who wronged him and turning them into playing cards. Batman thinks he's gonna be a target and goes after Joker at Arkham.
Do you really think I'd send a flunky to eliminate my favorite sparring partner? I reserve that pleasure for me alone.
Then why?
Because I miss your company, Batman.
Only the trap is to escape Arkham and leave Batman stuck in his cell. He's gotta pretend to be Joker to find a way out. Thought all that was pretty good stuff. This episode is when Joker trades his straitjacket design in for the more familiar purple suit look. I kinda liked that new design, but I guess it makes sense for him to look somewhat familiar on a first glance. Ethan and Yin hadn't been in the show for the past few episodes, so they're back in this one, and I really like their dynamic and what they bring to the episodes. They don't have the skills or resources of the Batman, but are devoted to saving people when they can and catching criminals. so they hold their own throughout the episodes. Episode 11 is about Penguin trying to rob Wayne Manor, thinking this will be his one time to get revenge on the Waynes and be somewhere Batman isn't. Obviously, that doesn't go according to plan, and then the fight between Batman and Penguin on the rainy rooftops of Wayne Manor looked really cool. The setup of this episode is Bruce doing a day-in-the-life interview for a TV show, but the showrunners get more invested in watching Batman fight Penguin. This being the first time there's any public footage of the Batman in this story, and when he's crowned the Dark Knight for the first time. So it's an important episode in seeing how Batman's reputation grows as the show goes along, but otherwise it's a fun watch as well. And Tom Kenny as Penguin is a perfect mix of crazy and comedic too. Everything in the season leads up to the two-part finale, the rubber face of comedy and the clay face of tragedy. Joker has a new formula called Joker Putty, which allows him to mold anything how he desires, and Chief Rojas has had enough of these clowns and freaks turning Gotham into a madhouse. So he's instituting a policy that all these people must be brought down at all costs. Because in episode 1, Gotham had the lowest crime rate in the nation, which is brought up again in the finale as Rojas announced it was recently declared the world's scariest city. So if Bennett doesn't deliver Batman on a silver platter, he's fired. Now he's got to work extra hard to no avail to catch Batman. Emotionally speaking, I think this episode arc is pretty compelling. Being Batman has made him feel awkward about being friends with Ethan all season long, but now that they're actively fighting, he thinks it's time to tell the truth, but that gets permanently put on hold when Ethan goes solo against Joker and is kidnapped. The Batman is a pretty kid-friendly show, nothing super dark happens most of the time, and this isn't really a dark plotline, but I do like how they captured the essence of the Joker's character in this scene. He's been pretty goofy up to this point, but here he intends to drive Ethan insane. It's G-rated psychological torture for sure, but it works because we've seen the pressure Ethan's been under to catch Batman and these villains all season. Now, his job is on the line and he can only take so much pressure, something the Joker is happy to take advantage of.
It's not my fault, Chief! No! Ah, so we have issues with the boss, eh? Bosses make terrific tormentors. Tote that barge, lift that bale, rewrite that script, sort that mail. All it takes is one rotten day to transform a normal man into a monster. Well, in my case, a rotten day and a chemical bath.
And that's the essence of Joker, cruelty with a weird smile. Kevin Michael Richardson excellently delivers his lines too, as he can go from high-pitched and laughing to lower and scarier in a second.
Ah, Detective, my therapy worked. It seems you and I finally share the same sense of humor.
When Batman and Yin show up, this Joker gets another moment to showcase how cruel and unpredictable he is when this happens.
You don't know what this stuff does to humans. For that matter, neither do I. Let's find out.
No!
What? No, we'll never know.
Just an utterly unflinching psychopath with a smiley, laughing clown gimmick. No matter what you do, that's just the core part of the Joker's DNA. And it's good this show was able to go there for this scene, as Batman fearlessly walks through Joker's madhouse to bring him to justice, never giving in to Joker's cruel behavior or temptations to go insane like him. But while it seems like the day is saved at the end of part 1, Ethan is clearly sick from the Joker gas. Part 2 is an effectively sad final episode. Ethan has turned into Clayface, and I think it was pretty cool of them to turn an original character into a classic villain. It made it so that nobody was going to see it coming until it happened. While not as cinematic as the BTAS Two-Face episode where we see Bruce's friend Harvey Dent become a villain, I think this episode does deserve points for making the villain a character we already liked. BTAS tried to do that somewhat, but all shows were more episodic back then. In the 2000s, you could have a character grow over an entire season and then culminate in this episode where he's gone insane and just wants revenge against Rojas for always bringing him down. It's pretty simple, but they just made Ethan Bennett a super likable character, and so seeing him become a monster is a sad development. But it reinforces how strong Batman is because his whole message in this episode is that it doesn't matter what happened to you, you can still make the choice to be good and do good. A philosophy that the Joker is determined to challenge at all costs. He is not in this episode, but you can feel his influence on the events throughout, especially when Ethan starts shapeshifting and becomes the Joker.
You know what separates the freaks from the normals? Just one rotten day. Ever had a really rotten day, Batman? Thought so.
For someone like Batman, it would probably hurt to see your best friend spouting the ideas of your worst enemy, but he's firm in his commitment to doing good nevertheless.
Joker's rotten to the core, by choice. A choice that's still yours to make, Detective.
Turn yourself in, Ethan. We can help you.
It's why I like Batman so much. Yin is also really torn. You like her character too, and it's in the final moment where you see that she realizes that Ethan was right. Batman is a net positive for Gotham. She can finally accept that now that she's seen Joker turn her best friend into a monster. Clayface is at large at the end of the episode, but now Yin and the Batman plan to work together in spite of Chief Rojas's zero-tolerance policy for all lawbreakers, which is the note Season 1 ends on. Now, all this talk about the Batman and how sick and aura-filled it was does warrant the discussion of how much that even matters. Many years ago, I discussed in depth what made Batman the Animated Series so great in a series of bad videos people seem to enjoy for reasons that endlessly elude me. But needless to say, I know pretty well what makes BTAS tick and why it's so beloved to this day. The Batman, by comparison, doesn't have such a legacy behind it. And that's because if you grew up with this show like I did, it being the sickest, most action-packed, aura-filled Batman series still hits when rewatching it 20 years later. But if you didn't, it probably won't. Do you want to watch a ninja Joker and Penguin fight against a high-tech Batman? No? Then this isn't for you. I liked it, though. Did you think it was weird when the last season of the animated series made the sky red at night? Well, you'd probably think it was even weirder that the Batman changes the color of the sky with each episode. I thought it looked pretty cool and gave each episode a different feeling at night. But the point is, BTAS offered a lot to the younger audience as an action-adventure show, but its depth of writing and character contributed to why it's so popular in numerous demographics. So this isn't really me saying why the Batman is better than its predecessor, I don't think it is, but I do think the show is a lot of fun to watch, and it succeeded at what they set out to make. They said they didn't want to make a crime show like the animated series often was. They wanted to make a superhero action show, and that's what the Batman is, and clearly it worked. The series was a merchandising powerhouse. Any Batman thing is ripe for a massive collection of toys with Batman and ugly multicolored variants of Batman and the Batmobile and toy gadgets and villains and costumes and DVDs and VHS tapes and video games. Naturally, I had a lot of stuff related to the Batman when I was a kid, but the one that stands out the most in my memory are the games. The Batman didn't get a traditional console game like Teen Titans or Ninja Turtles. Instead, this series had a plug-and-play game where you had a battery-powered controller with buttons on it that looked like a Batarang. You'd plug it into the AV ports on the TV and play that way. I was never very good at this game back in the day, though. It's kind of like the Batman beat-em-ups of the 90s, but with a focus on exploration and platforming a lot of the time, with vehicle sections tossed in for good measure. But it is pretty nostalgic to look at it now. There was also another plug-and-play Batman game that was about punching your villains with motion-controlled gloves in the year 2004 or 5 or whatever. It's about as good as it sounds. I had this and vaguely remember playing it and not being able to beat Bane because the controls were super unresponsive. Watching ZC Infinity play it on YouTube only reminds me of that fact, as it took him several minutes to do it here. This is one of those games that you had as a kid and knew it sucked. You then went to CartoonNetwork.com to see what kind of cool Flash games they had on offer for free instead. The Batman had a pretty sick action-adventure game where you chase after the Penguin in 2D platforming levels. I never beat this game because I couldn't get past this part where you're on a truck fighting the Kabuki twins, but I remember liking it a lot though. Point is, there was a lot of content outside the show to enjoy, and I did just that. The show was clearly popular and doing its job as it got all this merch and a second season. A lot of shows really get better with Season 2, but for the Batman, I would say they're pretty equally good. If you watch Seasons 1 and 2 back to back, it just feels like one solid story. What's different about Season 2 is that now most of the major villains are established and the writers can really play around with them. The biggest shift in the story is that Yin is working with Batman on the side and they get to mine the drama out of that. In Episode 1, Batman is forced by Penguin to reluctantly team up with Catwoman. So he tries to hide Catwoman from Yin, who thinks he might be working with her on the side and is actually the criminal she thought he was last season. But he proves himself by the end of the story. I already liked Yin in Season 1, but by Season 2, she really cements herself as one of the better additions to this series. Her working with Batman while Chief Rojas still hunts him adds an interesting dynamic to the story that no other Batman show has ever done before. Episode 2 focuses on her a lot as the Riddler debuts, challenging her and Batman to a series of riddles. Despite Batman solving most of the riddles in this episode, I do like how Yin gets the chance to shine in this episode, showing how strong she is and how smart she also is too. She's a really competent cop when Batman isn't in the spotlight, and I like this Riddler as well. He gets a lot more time to develop later in the series, but for now, he's a cool 21st century take on the character with a staff that controls a bunch of technology. The long black hair and suit are quite new compared to previous iterations, but as established with Season 1, the core gimmicks and dynamics between Batman and his foes are familiar, even if how it's presented feels fresh and new. Episode 5 introduces Killer Croc, and I'm sure you get the routine by now. He doesn't have a big backstory or feels like an outcast or anything like that. He's a big-ass mutant croc and he wants to rob banks and will flood the city to do it. In response, Batman gets this cool all-black swimsuit and fights with Croc in epic fashion where he just drowns the guy only to resuscitate him moments later, then leaving him for the police.
Crocs may like water, but they're no fish.
In episode 9, you get introduced to Ragdoll, a new villain who appeared in the comics for the first time in the same year as this episode. He's a contortionist and a thief that battles Batman and Catwoman. Not one of the more interesting villains this show has had, but the episode is good. Catwoman just takes a lot of L's this season. First, she gets duped by Penguin in episode 1 when she thought she was duping him, and then gets taken to task by Ragdoll a few episodes later. But I thought it was interesting how Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle meet in this episode and neither one knows the other is Batman and Catwoman. I just happened to forget that Batman didn't learn Catwoman's identity in either of her previous episodes, so it was interesting to watch their dynamic. And then there's the action scene in the clock tower, where we learn why Edna has a no-capes policy as Batman's gets caught in a gear. His cape is extra long in this series, and the reason for that is, it just looks sick. While Ragdoll might not have been the best villain ever in this episode, it was actually pretty cool when he came back for the video game Batman Arkham Asylum. What, do you not remember? He was literally every goon you fought. This season also introduces Spellbinder in the next episode. Turns out he was a more obscure comics villain from 1966. I had first heard of him when he appeared as a villain in Batman Beyond. I honestly just assumed he was an original villain like the others on that show, but either way, his gimmick was mind control illusions. Batman Beyond made his powers technological to fit in with the futuristic setting. The Batman makes him mystical as he hypnotizes butlers to steal from their rich masters. Batman trying to get to the bottom of it and even getting into a fight with Alfred at one point. I liked this episode, especially with the third act twist where the billionaires are hypnotized and it almost costs Batman his identity before Alfred escapes the room he was in and gets the signal to Batman that snaps him out of it. So those are all the new villains this season. What most of the episodes do then is combine them in cool ways. I already talked about how the Penguin and Catwoman team up and face off in episode 1, perhaps a tribute to Batman Returns. In episode 3, they gave us the obvious pairing of Firefly and Mr. Freeze. The latter is trying to create a Freeze Doom bomb and needs Firefly's help setting it up. But obviously, someone like this Freeze has no patience for or interest in working with Firefly beyond the one job. This episode was also important because Rojas wants to make Batman out to be the villain like usual, but he's so clearly the one that saved the day, so people cheer for him anyway. Episode 6 gives us the unique pairing of Penguin and Man-Bat as Cobblepot accidentally steals a speaker that controls bat creatures and tries to turn him on the Dark Knight before he creates his own control device that sets Langstrom free. Episode 4 was easily one of my favorites, as Joker and Penguin are both in it, but the plot is that Joker has decided he's going to be Batman now and beat up and turn people into Joker gas victims for petty crimes, while poisoning Batman with a thing that gradually turns him into the Joker, and it's a mad dash to get the antidote ready. I think the premise is super fun to watch as Joker plays Batman.
Break-in at the Gotham Museum of Art. This looks like a job for the Batman.
But this is also one of my favorite episodes for a personal reason, and I swear, every word I'm about to say is true. So, 13 years ago, I was watching this episode late one school night, and this is when I was in 5th grade, and the next day, the 8th graders had to dress up as a historical figure to tell their life story, typical middle school project stuff, but they had to do it in front of the entire school and all their parents and teachers and stuff, and after those presentations ended, I assumed there must have been some time left over, so the principal asked if anyone knew any jokes. So I decided to raise my hand and repeat word for word Joker's entire ending gag from this episode that I just watched the previous day.
You know, it's funny. This situation reminds me of a joke. A doctor told his patient, I have bad news and worse news. Oh dear, what's the bad news? Asked the patient. You only have 24 hours to live. That's terrible, said the patient. But how can the other news possibly be worse? The doctor replied, well, I've been trying to contact you since yesterday.
I fucking love that line, and the entire crowd totally lost it thinking it was hilarious. My comic genius was praised all day long, and forever after, I just said I came up with it. I know that totally sounds like a and then everyone clapped storyline, but it's true, it actually happened, exactly how I'm saying it did. So, I love this episode on its own merits, but that little story is why it's one of my favorites. Another one of my favorites was episode 8, JTV. I also vividly remember watching this episode late one night on a Boomerang rerun. In a plot straight out of the animated universe, Joker takes over the TV and captures the mayor and Yin's new partner, Cash Tankinson. So this episode has both Adam West playing the mayor and Patrick Warburton doing Cash Tankinson in his instantly recognizable voice.
Cash Tankinson's kicking butt and taking names. Such classic dialogue. What deadpan delivery. You are hilarious.
Ever consider acting? You're good.
Clown boy, you're going.
Down?
So that alone makes this episode pretty entertaining, but it also has a lot of good quips.
Just as soon as I abduct my co-star.
Shall I tape it for you, sir?
Tonight on The Joker, will Batman defeat our charismatic star in time to save the hostages? To find out, stay tuned. Same Joker crime, same Joker channel.
And great action sequences, while being another episode that shows how loyal Batman and Yin are becoming with each passing team-up. This is put to the test in the penultimate episode, Strange Minds, where Joker captures Yin and puts her in a box set to blow. The head psychiatrist at Arkham uses his machine to go inside Joker's mind, and Batman does the same. The episode is primarily an excuse to see bizarre visuals, but I dig it. I love plots where Batman has to really dive into the insane world that Joker lives in, really pushing him to the brink, but he finds a way to come out on top, which is exactly what this episode does. He wins by pulling Joker into his own mind and tricks him into thinking he already lost, which gets him to reveal where Yin is, allowing Batman to arrive just in time to save the day. Thinking about it, Joker gets a lot of screen time in this season. In episode 7, he shares the spotlight with the returning Clayface. And this is one of my favorite episodes because, again, you'd expect everything to be good and kind of return to status quo on a kid's show, but they don't do that here. Clayface tries to get revenge on Joker only to get captured by Batman. It adds a lot of punch to the story that Joker doesn't even know who Clayface is until halfway through the episode. He'd have no reason to know, but I just think it added a twisted element that, for Ethan, getting tortured by Joker is the event his life hinges around now, but for Joker, it was just another Tuesday. Bruce Wayne gives Ethan a job as head of security at Wayne Industries, and his release from Arkham was dependent on his never being Clayface again, which he can't help when Joker arrives on the prowl, trying to kill the clown before he gets to anyone else. I just think it made for a compelling story that Ethan feels like doing good at this point is hard. People think of him as a monster on the street and give him the side eye at work. So being Clayface is just easier than trying to reintegrate, which is why Yin ultimately tosses the freeze grenade at him to stop him. I found all that to be pretty compelling to watch. Clayface does appear again in Grundy's Night, but this appearance was far less interesting. Clayface turns into the mythical legend Grundy to terrorize rich homes and steal their money before Batman turns him into a wax statue. This appearance doesn't go into any of the depth that Clayface and Batman have between each other. He's just a supervillain at this point, so the episode didn't really do anything for me. It's not a bad action-adventure episode, I just thought it wasn't at the level of plot you'd expect from a Clayface episode. Everything culminates in the final episode, Night in the City, where Riddler challenges Joker and Penguin to compete with him on who can uncover Batman's identity, while Rojas tries even harder than ever to stop the Batman, even uncovering Yin's partnership with him. It's a pretty exciting episode in the first watch, since you don't know how it's going to be resolved. The villains work together at one point, but then you get a fight where Joker and Penguin team up against Riddler's goons before the three main villains try to battle Batman when he shows up, Yin being crucial yet again in helping Batman take them down. This episode resolves the plot with Batman and Yin and Chief Rojas, and also signals how the show is going to change going forward. Commissioner Gordon makes his first appearance and announces that he thinks the police shouldn't be wasting resources chasing Batman, and instead could be working with him to stop the supervillains. This episode fundamentally changes the status quo of the series by having the police officially back Batman in his becoming a city-renowned hero.
The hearts and minds of all of Gotham are behind you.
I do my best work from the shadows.
That won't need to change. All I ask is that you help me make Gotham a safe place for my daughter to grow up in.
For your daughter, then.
I think Night in the City is a good final episode, but on a rewatch, it's kinda sad to get to this point for me because of how much I liked these first two seasons. I think the Batman was the most original during the early episodes. It becomes a more standard Batman series in the following seasons as you have Gordon and the Bat Signal and all that standard Batman fare, when his being an adversary of the police was interesting to watch. These first two seasons make that status quo feel earned by the end, but I do enjoy the atmosphere of the first two seasons more than the rest. Don't know if that's a hot take at this point, but that's how I feel, especially because Yin, a standout character, never appears again. Even if she gets her badge back by the end of the episode, it just feels like the series lost some of its uniqueness in season 3 and beyond. I don't think that makes it bad, I just liked 1 and 2 the best. But the slightly good news is that this wasn't the last we got of the Batman before it became more typical. Between seasons 2 and 3, we got the direct-to-video film The Batman Vs Dracula. Merely one addition in a long line of direct-to-video DC animated films, most of which starring Batman, of course. I vaguely remember this movie being kinda hyped up and thinking it was pretty scary. I mean, I was about to turn 5 years old when this movie came out, so that should be obvious. It should also probably go without saying that watching BVD 20 years later doesn't get me shaken in my boots, but it was really good nevertheless, and I can see why I thought it was scary at the time. The plot is that Joker and Penguin both escape Arkham to find some secret treasure in a graveyard, and Penguin accidentally unleashes Dracula onto the city of Gotham. He was killed in Transylvania hundreds of years ago, and his coffin was sent far away and found itself buried in present-day Gotham City. Dracula begins building up his undead vampire army, while Batman has to find a way to take down this unprecedented threat. Like Mask of the Phantasm, there's a plot where Batman gets framed for the actions of the mysterious new threat and is chased down by the police, but ultimately figures out what's going on with the new villain and finds a way to stop them. When going from the series to the film, there were numerous things that jumped out to me. The action scenes were already the focus on the show, but it's still striking how much better looking the movie is than the series. Obviously, a film is a higher budget than a TV episode, but how much more violent it can get is noticeable. Like Batman's fist directly hitting Joker's face on screen with no flash or anything to cover it up. Then there's the existence of things that are just never on the show, like blood. Penguin's hand bleeding is the thing that awakens Dracula, which is really funny to see because nobody bleeds on the show. Here, a whole battle with Vampire Joker takes place in a blood bank, Joker getting utterly covered in it. The series also didn't directly reference death either, but the movie does multiple times. Like how the opening action scene ends with Joker falling to his death with his electric joy buzzer on and Batman thinks it killed him. On the series, everyone uses laser guns. When the cops chase down Batman, the designs are still laser guns like the show, but the sounds are typical gun sound effects. And they do the same when having Bruce reflect on the deaths of his parents, which was merely implied on the show. The animation and voice acting are a step up from the series as well. The team behind the movie is the same, and the voice director is also the same as the show, Ginny McSwain. But everyone feels more down to earth when talking in this movie, perhaps because a movie's slower pace might lend itself more to neutral voice tones than the emotion and energy required in a 22-minute action episode. But the whole thing feels very consistent, art design was still Jeff Matsuda, the story was written by Dwayne Capizzi, and the film was directed by Michael Goguen. So it really does feel like a part of the series you can naturally watch between seasons 2 and 3 of the show, and it carries on many of the same themes of the series. Like Alfred hoping Bruce can find a connection with Vicky Vale, but he's always going to put Batman first. And those goals overlap when he has to save her from Dracula when he tries using her to resurrect his deceased wife. The film ending in spectacular fashion as Batman destroys Dracula. It looks sick and the lines are raw as hell.
I'm the Batman. And you're dust.
The film doesn't really have any consequence in the rest of the show, but it's really good and well worth watching if you're binging the series. But unfortunately, you'd have to go out of your way to do so. The Batman is available for streaming on Max, but The Batman vs. Dracula is not on there. You'd have to buy it or rent it on YouTube or Amazon Prime, which is why you might have noticed a quality drop in the footage of the movie since it wasn't included in the Blu-ray set either, which I thought was extra odd because Teen Titans Trouble in Tokyo, the direct-to-video film for that series, was on that Blu-ray set. Looking into it, it's probably because that movie had its own independent Blu-ray release they could plop in, but The Batman vs. Dracula did not. However, I wish they put in the effort of remastering it alongside the series anyway. But speaking of the Blu-ray set is how I got footage of the show for the video like Teen Titans. It shows us that the Batman was animated in 16:9 but presented in 4:3 for broadcast. The widescreen footage actually looks pretty good in this show. If you saw my Teen Titans video, you'd know that I said the show looked good in full screen, but sometimes would have empty-looking shots on the sides since it was intended for 4:3. But the Batman, while not looking off at all at 4:3, also looks natural in widescreen, so I'd say the Blu-ray set is pretty definitive if you want to own the series physically. With that said, we can now return to the show with Season 3. As I was trying to say before, it's not as though the Batman takes some massive tumble into the abyss the moment Season 2 ends. I don't even think Season 3 is bad, or even not as good as the first two. I just think that it shifts focus into new territory, and my favorite era of the Batman will always be the first two seasons. One of the first things you'll notice changed is the intro. Gone is that dark and atmospheric track from The Edge, instead it's a much campier theme. It starts out pretty intense, but by the end it sounds like this. I don't think it's a bad intro, I just like the other one more. And this one certainly has better footage to work with, because the original intro just flashed clips from the first couple episodes, but this one has a plethora of shots to use, some of which are original. One of the main focuses of the second intro is the new character, Batgirl. She's the main draw of this season and gets a huge debut in the two-part opening episode, Batgirl Begins. I always loved the name of this episode, because it's no doubt a reference to the, at the time, recently released Batman film with the same subtitle, but I also like how that in and of itself continues a gag started in the animated series where they did the same thing with an episode titled Batgirl Returns as a nod to the Batman film with the same subtitle. In the new status quo, Batman is working alongside Commissioner Gordon trying to solve cases, like the new one. A for-hire villain called Trembler is attacking industrial plants in Gotham and the heroes need to find out why. Meanwhile, Gordon's daughter, Barbara, is friends with Pamela Isley, a teen activist who is the one hiring Trembler. An accident turns Pamela into Poison Ivy. Barbara is so motivated to get involved that she becomes Batgirl to the begrudging acceptance of Batman. I feel like saying this is becoming a hot take amongst many Batman fans, or at least ones who only watch the movies, but in my opinion, sidekicks add a lot to the story of Batman. His doing the loner routine at the beginning is how it should be, but placing him in the mentor position when he's more experienced at crime fighting is the perfect way to develop his character since he's already learned pretty much everything he's meant to by this point. I like how snarky Batman can get while also never stopping Batgirl from joining him because he understands the desire to want to help people, especially those you care about.
Not every child gets the opportunity to rescue their parent.
I also just like this Batgirl. Their fresh new take on the character was making her a spunky teenager, giving her a fun energy for both Batman and Gordon to have to bounce off of.
Ivy, time to give up.
Tried that. She's not interested.
Maybe she'll be interested in this.
The voice actress describes her role in the series pretty well.
Batman is a loner, he's very quiet, he thinks he knows it all, and Batgirl's character in the show, she's much more sarcastic, she's always trying to nudge him, get him to have a little bit more of a good time when he's fighting crime if that's possible.
And then Batgirl also gets her own nemesis whenever Poison Ivy gets an episode. Ivy feels pretty familiar to other versions with the activism and such, but her being a teen is certainly a new angle. Poison Ivy is the last classic Batman antagonist introduced into this series. Other big names like the Scarecrow, Two-Face, and the Mad Hatter never appear in the Batman. The reason for that is likely because of the Bat embargo. I explained this in my ancient and probably super cringe video on Justice League Unlimited Season 2, but here's the sitch. When the Batman entered production, the higher-ups at Warner Bros. Thought that having multiple versions of Batman characters on screen at the same time might be confusing for the kids. So while the Joker and Harley Quinn were allowed to appear on Justice League at first, once the Batman was on, they were not. The Joker was only able to appear on the Batman. Two-Face and Scarecrow aren't on the Batman because they were reserved for Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. Don't ask how Joker was in the Batman and The Dark Knight, I didn't write the rules. The reason why Batgirl was the first sidekick introduced in the Batman was because Teen Titans was still on while the Batman Season 3 was airing, so they weren't able to use Robin since he was on Teen Titans. Once that show was done, Robin could be in the Batman. I never really got this. As a kid, I understood pretty well that Justice League was a different version of Batman from the Batman, and that this version of Batman was not the same as the one in the movies at the time. But honestly, I think this one worked out for the best. I think Batgirl being introduced before Robin feels more fresh. It gives Batman a unique story with her as his first sidekick, and then adds some drama the writers could mine when Robin is introduced and fast-tracked as the sidekick over her. We'll get back to that in Season 4. The third season also introduces some new villains to toss into the mix, such as the owner of Cranko Toys that tries to kill Bruce Wayne for speaking out about their dangerous toys, such as the Proto-Pet.
I can't think of a toy more fun for a child, or one more dangerous. Just ask Timmy Snyder.
Up for some cops and robbers? Help! Police! So is you-know-who.
Nah, I'm just kidding, that's Ratchet and Clank. But this episode does bring back Cash Tankinson too, as Wayne's bodyguard, and I enjoyed watching that.
Occupied?
Sorry, Freddy.
A few episodes in, Batman and Batgirl face off with Gearhead, who can hijack vehicles and control them. This episode was especially toyetic because in it, the Batmobile gets destroyed, so Batman builds a new one. I normally poke fun at how much of a blatant merchandising decision this was, but I'll say, this new Batmobile was pretty cool. And seeing the old one get destroyed reminded me, of all things, of the time when Christopher Nolan was talking about the behind the scenes of The Dark Knight and was saying that the Batmobile is like a character in the movie and how destroying it is like a character death. And when seeing the original car from the show blow up, I was like, low-key, he's right though, that's what it felt like. Like the second season, the third one manages to do a lot of interesting and creative plot lines for returning villains too. Like A Fistful of Felt, where Wesker and Scarface return. Professor Hugo Strange, returning from Season 2, has a radical new treatment to sever Wesker from his alternative personality, but part of that involves putting Scarface back into his life when things are going well for him, just to see what he'll do, which leads to a relapse. Wesker is such an unthreatening guy that you really feel bad for him that his attempt to get his life together was derailed by the people who were supposed to be helping, Batman rightfully calling Strange out for it.
I don't approve of your methods, Professor Strange.
Says the man who dresses like a bat.
I'll be watching you.
I always loved the episode A Dark Knight to Remember where Batman loses his memory of being Batman during a fight with the Penguin and actually becomes the Bruce Wayne character he plays.
Okay, whoa, wait. Name your price, Penguin. I'll cut you a check. One with lots and lots of zeros.
But he has to become Batman again to save Batgirl. The funny and interesting premise was part of why I dug it so much, but also when I was a kid, I rewound this one action scene multiple times just to see Batman do this epic split kick. Penguin was good in this episode and in his other appearances as well. There's one episode where he's fighting against Mr. Freeze for some stolen treasure, which was a good episode as Alfred gets a lot of screen time in it too. I always enjoy that since he's one of my favorite Batman characters across multiple versions. And then Penguin also appears in a Poison Ivy scheme where she captures people and clones them. What makes this episode great is just this funny part where Batman and Batgirl discover the clones are coming from the same flower shop.
Are you here for some... You knew she was a plant, right?
Every enemy being a plant clone in this also allowed them to have Batman go to town on them during the action scenes. And Batgirl too, as she just runs her evil clone over. Joker gets many episodes focused on him too, such as the one where he traps Batman, Batgirl, and Catwoman in a giant maze in a remote island. The moral of the story being Batgirl learning about how a villain like Catwoman can mess with your head. But Joker is as entertaining as ever as the Master of Menace. He's paid by this dude to bring him some cats and gets his hyenas as payment, but then Joker gasses the guy anyway. And then another episode that was pretty interesting was Brawn. Joker is tired of being beaten up by Batman, so he steals Bane's venom tubes and uses them on himself to become super strong. A couple of years before Batman Arkham Asylum used Titan Joker as the final boss, I might add. Batman's only able to win when Batgirl uses her small size to her advantage, making herself a target that Joker can't reach, proving herself invaluable to Batman yet again. And to the show itself, as they can do a higher variety of stories now that Batman has a sidekick. Joker even tries getting one in episode 10. Barbara's class clown ends up becoming Joker's apprentice, Prank, but he doesn't want to actually hurt anybody, so Joker tries tossing him in the acid bath.
It was in this very chemical concoction that I collected my clowny complexion. And now it's your turn.
As I said for season 1, it's always good to have an episode where Joker is just casually or even gleefully cruel. It reminds you of how menacing he is and how twisted his clown gimmick is despite how entertaining he is as a villain. Batgirl making herself useful to Batman is her arc throughout the season, and it culminates in the final episode she appears in, episode 11, Thunder. Maxie Zeus tries taking over Gotham via politics, but when Mayor Grange is voted back in, he just does a hostile takeover. Gotta say, I thought Adam West cameoing as the mayor was neat in season 1, but he's actually a recurring side character, appearing multiple times in every season thus far, and is always voiced by Adam West, so it was really cool they got to use such a legendary figure in the Batman world more than once. But anyway, Batman himself is pretty ineffectual in this episode. It was Batgirl sneaking on board Zeus's ship and shutting off the machinery that saves the day and allows Batman to escape and stop him. Which is the moment where Batman decides she's finally worthy of her own official Bat gear, like a real utility belt, grapple, and Batwave. Though, the new utility belt isn't seen again for the rest of the show. Perhaps Barbara just thought the one she had fit the suit better, I don't know. But yeah, she's not in the last 2 episodes. This season finishes off with Gotham's ultimate criminal mastermind, a computer program called Dave, which stands for Digitally Advanced Villain Emulator. Though above all, I'm sure they picked that name as a reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey, but either way, it was created by Hugo Strange. Meant to understand the motivations of criminals by having their various case files uploaded to his system, effectively making him the best of all criminals. But naturally, the program escapes and becomes super strong and invincible. This might seem like a kind of out of left field final episode since it doesn't have anything to do with Batgirl, which was the main plot of the season, but that was resolved in episode 11. While season 1 and 2's final episodes directly paid off everything those seasons were building up to. However, this one follows up on Strange being suspicious ever since his debut in Season 2. Dave was actually created to escape and discover the identity of the Batman who Strange is obsessed with. Dave almost broadcasts Batman's identity to the city before the Dark Knight saves the day by giving him an existential crisis. But, I have to say, the fact that Strange could be so fixated on Batman that he'd create a computer villain to figure out his identity is kind of laughable to me. The process Dave uses to find out who Batman is something anybody could have pieced together. I don't care how good Bruce's Playboy act is. It is simple. Who has the motive to fight crime, the age range and physique of Batman, and the monetary resources to fund all these custom-made gadgets and vehicles? Bruce Wayne. Those questions alone narrow it down to like 0.03% of Gotham's population. I just wanted to point that out. Batman is by far my favorite superhero, but I really feel like figuring out who Batman is should be really easy to everyone in the DC universe. When Superman would, in my opinion, be harder to nail down. Even if the glasses look of Clark Kent gets clowned on all the time online for being obvious. But really though, in the minds of an average person, why would Superman need a day job? And why would you try to find the secret identity of a superpowered godlike being who doesn't even wear a mask? Whereas Batman, nah, it's totally obvious who it is if you think about it for 10 minutes. But I'm getting off subject. Batman shuts down Dave and exposes Strange, getting him locked up in Arkham, but he'll be back as the villain of an episode in Season 4. But for the time being, that's the note Season 3 goes out on. As I stated before, Season 3 of The Batman is still really good. It has great action sequences, creative storylines, and enjoyable characters, both good and evil. Batgirl added a lot to the show, which easily could have gone the other way if the writers and actors weren't so talented in bringing the characters to life. I like this season. I prefer the aura of Seasons 1 and 2, but this is still fun and has really good episodes. At this point, the season segments are getting shorter because the show is ultimately focused on sick action scenes, so I'm just putting attention on the character bits that come between those. The show is still succeeding in what it sets out to do by this point, and I'm still enjoying rewatching it. Now for Season 4, I remember quite well watching the DVDs for this one especially often, and I was really excited to get my hands on it just going off the Wikipedia summaries of each episode. Rewatching it, I can see why. This season really hits with a roster of cool and interesting episodes and all-star voice work. In Episode 1, A Matter of Family, we get introduced to the Flying Graysons. As you might expect, Dick Grayson's parents die while performing because they wouldn't pay protection money to Tony Zuko. Bruce Wayne was devastated to watch this happen from the audience and takes in the now orphaned Dick Grayson. If you're familiar with the backstory of Robin from the comics or just saw the BTAS episode, Robin's Reckoning, the plot will be pretty familiar. Batman is relentless in trying to find Zuko, but Alfred points out that Dick doesn't need Batman to find Zuko as much as he needs Bruce Wayne to be his father. By the end of the story, Dick discovers Bruce is Batman and becomes Robin and takes down Zuko alongside the Dark Knight. As stated a moment ago, this episode is pretty by the numbers if you know the story already, but first, they make the deaths of Robin's parents about as gruesome as it could get on this show. Like I said when talking about Vs Dracula, death does not come up directly on this show very often, so this was a notable exception. But I also want to give this episode huge props because Dick's father, John Grayson, is voiced by Kevin Conroy, the iconic voice of Batman from the animated series and a plethora of other Batman projects.
I'm telling you, Mary, a leash is the only answer for that boy.
And Tony Zuko was voiced by Mark Hamill, the Joker in the animated series.
I threw the knives and Dad hoped I wouldn't hit him. It was quite an act, really.
That gave the episode a real emotional impact as the previous generation of Batman and Joker passed the torch in this episode. Despite them being the ones who would play those characters more times than anyone after this, but that's neither here nor there. Robin really does bring a lot to the Batman mythos, so much so that I want to make a whole video about that after this. But for now, I'll just say that, similar to Batgirl in Season 3, this just presents Bruce Wayne with a new challenge. One he can't just solve by punching people really hard as Batman. He has to roll up his sleeves and be a father, which is much tougher work than punching people, even if he looks sick as hell while doing that.
Password.
Tony Zuko. Where is he?
But speaking of looks, Season 4 also changed Batman's design slightly. His face is more square with a boxed chin like most other animated depictions of Batman. Maybe the idea was him aging into the role of the Batman audiences are more familiar with, but the design change isn't canon. A flashback that takes place at least before Season 2 shows Batman with his current design while showing him in the old Batmobile, so it's not canon. I liked the old design better, but to be real, if that never existed and this was all we ever had from this show, I wouldn't even notice, nor would I wish he looked like how he used to. But while I am here talking about the intro of Robin, I figured I'd say that I totally subscribe to the fan theory that the Batman was an unintentional prequel to Teen Titans. The Robin from the Batman does look like a younger Teen Titans Robin, and it would make a lot of sense. Like, why is Robin such an OP menace in that show? Well, maybe because his Batman was a super fighter and all of Gotham's rogues in this show are OP ninjas too. It would also make sense for Robin to be a good team leader since he was on a full team in this show. Little details get in the way, like both shows having a take on the Killer Moth, but I don't know, maybe he changed with age. Or maybe it's a different dude, not like villains are trademarked. This season introduces a second Clayface to the Batman, so it's possible. It's not like I'm here to die on that hill, but I do think it's a fun theory that I like to believe in as well. It adds some extra world building to both shows if you choose to believe in it. But with the intro of Robin, we also get the show's final intro. It's the same music as Season 3, but they added shots of Robin into it. Like this pretty cool final shot. Or when he jumps through the ring as a reference to his debut comic. But what was weird about this was how Episode 1 didn't play a sound effect for it. I was thinking, I swear to God there was a sound for that. Wasn't sure if my memory of the intro was wrong or not, but then Episode 2 added it in, and I was happy to be proven correct. Speaking of Episode 2, it was fantastic. Penguin watches a heist movie and realizes how effective it is for the bad guys to work together and assembles a team to pull off jobs and beat the Bat. A roster consisting of himself, Ragdoll, Killer Croc, Firefly, and the new Killer Moth. Penguin showing himself as a horrible leader in comedic fashion.
What if we call ourselves the Gotham Gangsters?
Team Penguin is not up for debate!
But this episode is all about teamwork as Batgirl returns and sees that Robin exists. She's rightfully pretty annoyed that the new kid just got to know his secret identity, be his official sidekick, and has been training with Batman after she put in all that work last season and wasn't even close to that level of reward. But he fixes it by bringing her into the fold, knowing that Batgirl and Robin need to learn how to be a team and not treat each other as competition for Batman's attention. I like how the writers got all the drama they needed to out of Batgirl and Robin meeting right away, but quickly putting them into an older sister-little brother dynamic instead. A worse show might have dragged it out for several episodes, but this one only does it for a few scenes. From that point forward, Robin is the go-to sidekick, as Batgirl shows up every couple of episodes instead. And there's only one episode of the entire series after Robin is introduced where it's just her and Batman, but that's not till Season 5. The next episode, Clayfaces, establishes this trend since she's not in it, but Robin is. But I'm glad this episode exists, though. It went back to the Clayface story from earlier in the series, which was dropped entirely from Season 3. This time, Wayne Industries has developed a cure for Ethan's mutation, while a failed actor, Basil Carlo, intentionally turns himself into Clayface, battling with the original and the dynamic duo. We don't get to see Ethan's life beyond getting cured since he doesn't appear again, however, it's just nice that such a well-meaning character is allowed to have that redemption even if it was ultimately off-screen.
Your tests show a complete remission of the mutated cells.
When I get out of here, what do you say we shoot some hoops?
Count on it.
I know I have a long way to go, but I hope I can earn back your trust.
Shame they didn't bring Yin back for a final send-off either, but you take what you can get. An episode I never really liked was the next one, The Everywhere Man, where Batman and Robin investigate a guy who can endlessly clone himself. I don't know how best to describe it, I just always thought it was boring. It's not a villain anyone cares about, and his drama isn't concerning any character who has appeared before or will again. The main clone ties up the original inventor while he takes his place as this super cool playboy billionaire, while the original was comparatively less cool, but was more likable to the people around him. I don't know, this one just didn't do anything for me. Probably my least favorite episode of the show thus far. When I was a kid, I got bored of the episode Strange New World, but now I liked it though. Hugo Strange poisons Batman into believing the city's become infested with zombies, so Batman thinks he's creating the antidote and spreading it to the city when what actually happened is that he's releasing the virus. I thought it was an interesting episode since you can probably pick up pretty fast on the fact that Batman was the one poisoned early on, but it's a gradual descent as more and more people become zombies and Batman fights them off, when in reality they were trying to break through to him that he's acting crazy. I thought it was an effective way to show that Strange is a pretty dangerous villain as far as psychological foes are concerned, so this was another winning episode to add to the mix. The next one, Breakout, was easily one of my favorites from the whole show, though. In it, Black Mask is introduced to the audience for the first time, which was also my first time ever seeing the character in anything. Black Mask's scheme is that he's going to blow up parts of Gotham and escape jail. Batman tells his sidekicks to be at the police station to help, while they make fun of him behind his back like siblings would.
I have an important mission for you two. The Batmobile must be washed. 2 coats of wax this time.
And don't forget to hang one of those tree-shaped air fresheners. The fate of Gotham depends on it.
Meanwhile, Batman looks for the Doomsday device, getting himself captured in the process. Even while captured, though, he's pretty dope.
That just means a little more work for me, and a lot more pain for you.
But this was all part of Black Mask's plan, as his goons used knockout gas to take out the police station, so it's just up to Robin and Batgirl to stop the army of highly trained thugs from releasing Black Mask. When I first watched this episode back in the day, I was on the edge of my seat as these sidekicks overcome the odds and prove themselves as important parts of Batman's fight against crime. I just think the two are written really convincingly, as Robin is pretty scared at the idea of Batman being gone, but is encouraged by Batgirl to fight anyway. It was just a really enjoyable episode, one that ends on a funny note.
Now, who wants to watch the Batmobile?
On the rewatch, it's still one of my favorite episodes of the whole show. And then the next several episodes were just a string of bangers one after another. Like Artifacts, where it takes place in the year 3027. Mr. Freeze put himself on ice in the hopes of waking up in a world without Batman. The A-plot is a group of researchers digging up the Batcave in the hopes that Batman left something behind people could use to stop his villains in the future. The B-plot is Batman's last battle with Freeze, which, by the way, how sickening is it that when this episode was coming out, the vague future date they picked for this battle to take place in was 2027, a whole 20 years after the episode debuted, and now that year is right around the corner. Anyway, in the future, Batman has his Dark Knight Returns design and a Batmobile akin to that one. Barbara Gordon is now Oracle, and Robin is now Nightwing, and they're fighting Mr. Freeze. Batman refusing to give up until the mission is complete. The episode trying to leave you in suspense that maybe Batman lost this one. But it turns out that Batman did beat Freeze, and did leave something behind for the people of the future after all.
If you're viewing this message, I can only assume one thing. The mission isn't over. State the nature of the emergency.
The solution was everyone disguising themselves as Batman using holograms to really fuck with Freeze.
And yet I am here. And always will be here to stop you, Freeze. Always. No!
I liked this episode for the visuals and story, but I also like the detail of how 1,000 years later, the stories of Batman are easy to lose. This group of people mistakenly think Thomas Wayne was Batman because the Batcave is located under the property owned in his name. Little details and story bits like that made it an episode I enjoyed. When I was a kid, I really loved the stories of Seconds and Riddler's Revenge. Seconds is a really interesting episode. It's about a guy who's mastered the ability to rewind time a few seconds in a way nobody notices but him, so he can pull off perfect crimes by getting unlimited do-overs, including fights with Batman. He'll just take a hit, rewind time, and then dodge that hit. Batman just eventually getting so much deja vu that he comes up with new moves instead. Watching it now, like 20 years later almost, I still think it's a creative villain threat that leads to interesting action scenes. Long ago, I thought the plot was captivating because of the villain being a guy who made some big mistakes trying to make ends meet and served a bunch of time for it, losing everything in the process. But when his son dies in his city-ending scheme, he manages to go back in time before any of it happened and live a nice life. Watching it now, it's pretty ankle deep, but I remember feeling sorry for him when I first watched the episode, and I still appreciate it now for how unique the episode feels and for how we get to see Bruce, Alfred, Barbara, and Dick interact like a family for the first time in this episode. The dynamics feeling real and genuine. The cast clearly had a lot of chemistry. Riddler's Revenge is on the same wavelength, where I watched it in 2008 and was like, oh my god, Riddler actually has a tragic backstory where he got betrayed by his lab partner and he cried at the end? It's still not very deep or complex by BTAS standards, but I really like how they gave us an episode to humanize a villain who, up to this point, has just been a one-dimensional psycho. He had a dad who didn't get him and projected that anger onto every rich and influential guy he came across. Batman effortlessly realizing that it was the lab partner who sabotaged Riddler's work, not the rich guy trying to buy him out, because how would that guy even know how to sabotage his work to begin with? The whole thing is done in an interesting way as Batman and Riddler are stuck in a shipping crate at the bottom of the river while Riddler goes over his own backstory. So I still enjoyed this episode on the rewatch, even if it's also pretty simple. In another interesting twist, Harley Quinn is introduced at the tail end of the season, in what I'm pretty sure is her first appearance in a Batman adaptation outside of the DCAU. If you somehow didn't know, Harley first debuted as a Joker henchwoman in Batman the Animated Series in 1992. But she was so great that she became a recurring character in the show and then appeared in the shows that were set in the same continuity. Superman TAS, Justice League, Batman Beyond, etc. Her first printed appearance was BTAS's comic tie-in, but Harley first appeared in the mainstream DC Comics universe in 1999. The Batman debuted Harley in 2007 and went with a different take on the character. Instead of her being a tragic doctor at Arkham who was emotionally manipulated by Joker into being a criminal and his abuse victim, she's a talk show host. But one of the most interesting things about this Harley is how they show her relationship with Joker. At the end of the episode, he leaves her for dead because, like Batman says, he doesn't care about anything but himself.
The Joker doesn't care about anyone but himself.
Same as the animated series.
The Joker doesn't love anything except himself.
But what's different in a compelling way is how they made the story. What if Joker actually kinda likes Harley in this? The DCAU Joker never did. It was a game from day one with him. But this Joker actually likes Harley's show and watches it before he sees her getting taken off the air as a chance to recruit her. He gets mad when she tries calling the shots, but it seems like he enjoys her company in this, while not having a problem throwing her to the wolves if it meant saving himself. And I thought it was a cool new twist to their dynamic. Harley is played by Hynden Walsh in this, aka Starfire on Teen Titans. And I would love to visit the parallel universe where she became the go-to Harley voice after the original Arlene Sorkin retired from acting. Instead, I live in this universe where I became Tara Strong starting in Batman Arkham City. I thought she was fine in those early appearances, but with time, her Harley voice has become so loud and annoying to listen to. This one is much better.
Call me Harley Quinn!
Sounds crazy and silly, but still like a real person and not a cartoon character, which Tara's Harley has become, and then some. But the only other time Harley appears in this season is a cameo in the episode Rumors. A new vigilante's in town and he's locking up all of Gotham's criminals to destroy them in one fell swoop. I liked how this episode kept you slightly guessing what's going on, like the guy who manufactured the tech that Rumor is using has a bodyguard who's voiced by Ron Perlman, the same voice actor that Rumor has. And I was like, oh, it's him. But then you see the inventor try on the exosuit later in the episode and you're like, oh, it's him? But no, it was the bodyguard, trying to get revenge because his boss lost his legs in a Joker attack. Batman and Robin arriving to save the villains and put them all back in jail. The episode shows how powerful Batman and Robin are by this point since they take down literally every villain the show has ever had in the final action scene. And they really don't miss anyone. You see Joker, Harley, Penguin, his bodyguards, Catwoman, Freeze, Firefly, Bane, Scarface, Wesker, Clue Master, Killer Croc, Spellbinder, Ragdoll, Poison Ivy, Strange, Tremblor, Man-Bat, everyone is here. Most of the villains don't get speaking roles in this, you can't afford that many actors for one episode, but many do speak, like Penguin, Joker, Catwoman, and Strange. But the rest are just here for the action scene, which looks pretty spectacular. One of the best fight scenes in the show for sure. It's just another banger episode to add to the show's ever-growing list. Unfortunately, the two final episodes of the season aren't on that list. The Joining Parts 1 and 2 are fine episodes. It's not like I'm here to be like, actually, this episode sucked bazooka balls or something like that. Instead, I just think this episode arc is the lead-in to the last season, which is easily my least favorite of the entire series. The plot is that alien robots called the Joining are here to invade and destroy the Earth. Batman and crew must team up with J'onn J'onzz, the Martian Manhunter, to stop them. This is what I was talking about when Season 2 wrapped up. That the Batman goes in a different direction. Here more than ever. I thought this show was just most enjoyable when Batman was the mysterious vigilante fighting criminals and evading the cops. Naturally, you can't do that forever, that would get boring. That's why Season 3 and 4 ended that plot and gave Batman sidekicks, to great effect as the last 20 minutes or so has gone into. But then, the moment you introduce alien invaders and the Martian Manhunter, well, that's a point of no return where the stakes must go up to keep the show interesting. As it stands, I thought this episode was a good watch. Batman meeting Martian Manhunter for his first superhero team-up was a cool creative choice, where most would naturally just default to it being Superman. And I think it's cool how Batman just casually knows he's a Martian because Batman just knows everything.
I could teach a college course on Martians, except I always filed them away under urban legends.
And the episode is an emotional through line that gets to the heart of Batman's character. He's trying to rely on Batgirl and Robin less and shuts them out of the mission. They think it's because he's mad at them and doesn't trust them, but it's because he loves them so much that he doesn't want them to fight alien robots.
It's never been about not needing you. It's about not losing you.
That's very sweet of him. But the end of the episode sees the invasion stopped for the time being. Batman realizing he needed J'onn and his sidekicks and Alfred and Lucius Fox to save the day. So maybe teamwork isn't so bad. Side note, Lucius Fox debuts in this episode. He was apparently there the whole time, just never appeared before, and has helped Batman with his technology. Credit to the Nolan movies, Morgan Freeman's Lucius really made the character a lot more iconic, and as a result, he's appeared in a lot of Batman media ever since. I think it makes sense for Batman to have certain people on hand to do things for him, like design technology. I think Batman is best if he's good at most everything, but not an expert at everything, capable of doing it all by himself. That stretches your disbelief more than him having a trusted inner circle. But anyway, the teamwork idea is expanded at the very end of the episode as J'onn takes Batman to the Watchtower, a space station that looks like the Hall of Justice from Super Friends. In it, he meets the Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman, and Green Arrow. If this was a corny 2000s superhero movie trailer, Martian Manhunter would have been all like, "I'm putting a team together, Batman," and then drama pound cut to the logo. And maybe end the trailer on some kind of a quip like,
"When you were going to tell me about your space station."
Get tickets now.
But in all seriousness, that teaser is the setup for Season 5, which is basically all about the formation of the Justice League. As I said a couple of minutes ago, Season 5 is pretty easily my least favorite of the whole show. Is it bad? Definitely not, but I just think it's fundamentally trying to be a much different show from what's come before. During my recent Teen Titans video, the last season was also my least favorite there too. In both cases, I think it's because the show tries to expand in a way that feels kind of bland or boring compared to what came before, where the focus was on the main cast. The difference is that I think a 5th or even a 6th season of Teen Titans could be good, but I just didn't like the plot they ended up going with for the last season as much as the previous ones. For the Batman, I don't think there was anywhere else for the show to go to stay interesting besides expanding to the larger DC universe. But again, we've reached a different show than the one we've started with. Season 5's opening demonstrates the season's focus. Beginning with a two-parter, the Batman-Superman story. Even with that massive preamble, I once again have to say I don't dislike this episode. In fact, I thought part 1 of this episode arc was especially good. Superman is my third favorite hero behind Batman and Spider-Man, so seeing him in this series is great fun. Especially because we don't usually get to see great Superman content these days as often as Batman and Spider-Man, or even other heroes for that matter. Hoping that starts to change after the new movie comes out, but time will tell. The plot here is pretty paper thin, but it goes like this. Because of the alien invasion, Gotham needs to be rebuilt, so Superman arrives to town to deliver a check to the new mayor. But Metallo arrives to kill Superman, having been sent by Lex Luthor. Batman takes the kryptonite from Metallo for safekeeping, but Superman wants it. Lex then tries various methods of killing Superman, including hiring Batman villains to do the job, only for Batman to save the day again, while slowly working up to a partnership with Superman. Part 2 was less enjoyable than Part 1, though. In Part 2, Superman is mind-controlled by Lex for most of the runtime, so he doesn't get many lines besides grunts in Part 2. However, what made the episode arc interesting is that they do a flip of the usual dynamic these two have. Throughout this show, we've seen Batman go from the loner into someone who works with sidekicks and other heroes. Typically, Superman is the bright and optimistic guy who makes Batman a little more lighthearted. In the DCAU, Batman said as much at Superman's grave when everyone thought he was dead. But in this universe, Superman is that beacon of light still, but also prefers to work alone, and it's Batman who makes him more receptive to the help of other people.
I prefer to work alone.
So did I, once. But I found out you never know when you might need a friend.
I thought that was an interesting new angle. Speaking of the DCAU, naturally this episode will get you to think of the 3-part episode of Superman the Animated Series where he and Batman teamed up for the first time. It should probably go without saying at this point that I find that story more compelling than this one, as each character has something more going on besides basic motivations, and the plot does more than set up good action scenes. But we should be used to this by now. This is what the Batman is about first and foremost. So while this episode isn't as good as World's Finest, it's a fun and enjoyable first meeting of this Batman and Superman. Speaking of the DCAU Superman though, the voice cast will be familiar to enjoyers of that continuity. George Newbern reprises his role of Superman from Justice League and Justice League Unlimited, and Clancy Brown and Dana Delaney are back as Lex Luthor and Lois Lane respectively, both having played those characters in Superman the Animated Series and Justice League. I'm not sure why they used old actors for this episode. Maybe it was easier than casting 3 new characters for one episode. But JLU was off the air for over a year, so it certainly wasn't any super embargo or whatever. One reason I could think of was that the legendary voice director, Andrea Romano, took over as voice director for the Batman in seasons 4 and 5, so maybe it was her idea, since she already worked with these actors on those previous shows. And then Clancy Brown was already in this series as Freeze anyway. But whatever the reason was, I was fine with it, because these voices for Lois and Luthor are perfect, and George Newbern is in my top 2 Superman voices. The other one is Tim Daly, the voice from Superman TAS, the other DCAU Superman. Which one is my favorite depends on the day, I suppose. But the point is, these actors are fantastic in these roles, so I don't mind. Especially nice that we get to see Newbern do Clark Kent. Justice League and Justice League Unlimited rarely ever showed Clark Kent, so here he's allowed to do the awkward goober act. I like the idea that yes, Superman does it to protect his identity, as shown in the opening scene.
I got a little problem. I left my press pass in my other pants and they won't let me in.
I swear, Clark, it's a wonder you remember to wear pants at all.
But I also think he does it because he's really entertained by it as well.
There's a cable special tonight on the plight of the long-eared jerboa. I was wondering if...
Gee, Clark, I'd love to, but I have to wash my hair.
Like, he really didn't have to do any of that, but he did, and we love to see it. Past that point, many episodes follow a specific formula. DC Animation alum Alan Burnett joined the crew in Season 5, and he summed it up well. He said that Season 5 of The Batman is the Brave and the Bold season, a reference to the classic comic book series of the same name where Batman would team up with a different DC hero in each issue. So, Season 5 of The Batman has an episode where he and Robin will team up with the Flash against Mirror Master, an episode where they work with Green Lantern against Sinestro, one with Green Arrow against Count Vertigo, and another one where they work with Hawkman against Shadow Thief. This is the roster of the Justice League that was teased in Season 4, and these episodes give these heroes their own spotlight for an episode, giving the audience the chance to learn about them and their world a little bit. You may have liked Green Arrow on JLU, I certainly did, but you don't really learn about him or his backstory in that show. But you do in this episode, seeing a flashback of him stranded on the island and surviving and having a vendetta against Vertigo. GL's episode was my introduction to Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, since prior to this, when I was a kid, I assumed Jon Stewart, the GL featured on Justice League, was the main one. But despite that positive of introducing you to DC heroes, each of these episodes have one issue shared between all of them. I thought it was kinda bland. Not bad, but not anything special. Like Batman teaming up with the Flash against Mirror Master. The episode is pretty by the numbers. It's got decent fight scenes and character banter, but nothing that would feel super new to anyone binging the show, which is somewhat inevitable when watching an action show like this. But that's why this season is so Justice League focused to begin with, because they said, with where this Batman has gotten in 4 seasons, what story is left to tell for him besides seeing how he works alongside other heroes who are his equals, and that's what we got. It's fine, but the least interesting season. If anything, this season almost feels like a predecessor for the next Batman show, Batman the Brave and the Bold. It took the idea of adapting the aforementioned comic series a lot more literally. It was a campy Silver Age tribute show where Batman teamed up with a different hero in every episode, fighting some threat from the DC universe. I'm not gonna say this season was the pitch for that show, since Brave and the Bold came out just a few months after the Batman ended, so it was probably in development alongside Season 5, and the creative team isn't the same between the two shows. I just thought it was an interesting coincidence that both were inspired by the same thing. Ultimately, I feel like it works better in a dedicated series committed to not being a Gotham-centric Batman show in favor of a Silver Age DC Universe show starring Batman. That way, it can focus on that idea. But The Batman had a core cast and story that kinda gets tossed on the sidelines in favor of showcasing a new hero in most of the episodes. Like, for example, Alfred and Batgirl, two of this show's best characters, are completely sidelined. Especially Alfred. He's only in it for a couple of what amount to cameos in Season 5, when he used to be a big player in almost every episode from the start. And he was one of my favorite characters in the show. For the last time, Season 5 just feels like a different series, with the same coat of paint as Season 1. It looks and feels and sounds like The Batman, but is basically a different show. That's not to say we never get Gotham-focused episodes, they do exist, such as Joker Express, where he mind controls people into stealing for him and the Bat Trio needs to shut him down. This was a great episode, though I did notice how, now that the show is almost over, you'd kind of forget that Joker was once an OP ninja in this series at one point, since he doesn't do as much fighting in the last season when he appears. Which he does a few times, like you'd expect. His other big episode, The Metal Face of Comedy, was probably my least favorite Joker episode all series, though. Again, not poorly made or constructed, I just thought it had a little too much Joker now because there are 2 Jokers in this story, which becomes a bit much by the end. Though this episode does poke a hole in that Teen Titans headcanon thing again. Because Robin uses Nightwing as his online gaming avatar, when in Teen Titans, Starfire traveling to the future is when Robin gets the idea.
So, Nightwing, huh?
So, womp womp for that theory, I guess. I still like it though. When Penguin appears in this season, I remembered how his character also used to be a lot more in this show. Not by much, but he had the goal of bringing the Cobblepots back in Season 1 and was kinda creepy in his debut episode, but now, he's been pretty flanderized and is an incompetent idiot. The episode The End of the Batman might seem cool as Batman and Robin have direct rivals, Wrath and Scorn, but I don't know, this plotline of sons of criminals put in jail, now fighting to protect the honest living of supervillains by fighting Batman and Robin, just doesn't feel as interesting to watch as it might sound. It was another episode where I was like, yeah, that was alright. Nothing to see here as these characters never appeared before and never again, so the friend of Bruce Wayne, enemy of Batman thing fell pretty flat. The season's not all mid, though. In White Heat, Firefly mutates into a fire being and calls himself Phosphorus. It was cool of the team to give this villain an explosive send-off, and gets points for having Batman, Robin, and Batgirl in it as they make a great team in this show. And the show returns to its roots a little bit by giving Batman a sick-looking, all-black anti-fire suit with red eyes. Batman and Batgirl then team up without Robin when the Terrible Trio attack on her college campus. You could say this episode wasn't that special, and it certainly wasn't. I mean, mutant kids attack and the heroes save the day, with a pretty abrupt ending too. But I did like it because Batgirl hasn't gotten much screen time with just Batman in a while, so that's nice to see. And it was definitely more interesting for these three characters to be mutated and not just in animal costumes like their BTAS episode. But with all that said, the season comes to a close in the final episodes, Lost Heroes Parts 1 and 2. The Justice League's superpowered members, Superman, Martian Manhunter, Green Lantern, Flash, and Hawkman are all kidnapped by the Joining, the alien race that is still determined to take over the world. With the help of Hugo Strange, they capture the League and build robots to steal their powers in exchange for giving him knowledge of the universe, which fries his brain. Batman, Robin, and Green Arrow rescue their fellow teammates who now have no powers. In Part 2, Batman shows the other heroes that he has weapons to counteract all of them they can use in the robots. I like how, as you'd expect, this bothers the other members of the Justice League, but Superman is like, it's my fault. If Batman had this before, we could have saved a lot of time when I was mind-controlled. Nice to see it quickly addressed how having these internal countermeasures against literal gods and aliens is probably a good thing, especially in a crisis like this. Batgirl also gets to help in Part 2 as well, as the mission is destroying the bots and giving everyone their powers back. Credit to the season, the finale feels pretty natural, because giving each hero their own episode means you can team them up in the finale without needing to establish the team. You can just dive right into the story. But ultimately, the finale sums up the whole season, really. It was fine. I liked it in many moments. It had entertaining action and dialogue, but yeah, it doesn't really do anything super new, especially since the Justice League show already existed for 5 years before this, so it's not even that novel of a concept. But I like the ending and how it just focuses on Batman and his goofy but endearing kid sidekicks, since that's what the show was really all about at the end.
Man, we've got the coolest clubhouse.
We?
Junior Justice League. Teen Division.
Nice try.
The video was called Every Episode Reviewed and Ranked, so now that I've discussed every episode, we can move right along to the ranking. I saw on tiermaker.com that somebody did do a tier list for every episode of the show, and it was good. Since I just watched all 65 episodes, I was able to tell which of the episodes was which just from the images. Well, except for the Scarface ones, I had to guess for those. But I figured I would go ahead and make my own anyway. So I took my own pictures of a memorable frame from each episode, then I created a little border to show what season it was from. The color of each border was based on the color of the corresponding DVD set. Then made the images for the correct tier maker size, and then I assembled the tier. I also included Vs Dracula for the heck of it. The link to this tier list will be in the description if you want to make your own. I ranked each episode on a scale of 1 to 5, since I don't think there are any episodes of this show worthy of a 0. A 1 is for an episode that I thought was really boring. Not poorly done, but just not interesting. A 2 fails at something major I couldn't overlook, but I didn't hate watching it. A 3 ranges from that was good but unremarkable to that was mid-city. A 4 is a great episode, and a 5 is an episode that goes the extra step to do something interesting while also being great. So let's put together the list. Season 1 is really strong. These tiers are ranked in order of appearance, not quality, I might add, but every episode gets the benefit of feeling fresh and interesting because it's a new series, so a lot of 4s and 5s across the board. Even an episode like Traction, which debuts one of the worst Banes I've ever seen, still got a 4 because of the other emotional beats the episode has. As I said, Season 2 is the continuation of what made Season 1 work, so it gets scores along the same line. Though it's the first season to have a, well, that was alright, episode with the Freeze and Firefly team-up. And Grundy's Night is the only 2 on the list because it just failed to justify its own existence. Like Clayface escaping Arkham off-screen and with the intention of stealing money for unknown reasons based on an old myth, like, he's a clay monster, what does he need money for? It just feels completely out of place compared to every other part of Ethan Bennett's story that I had to give it a bad rating, even if it was a good episode in every other respect. Vs Dracula was an easy 5, though. One of the highlights of this era of Batman. Season 3 then had a lot of upsides. More than one episode in the mid category, but still really good and has episodes with 4s and 5s. Season 4 also managed to stay in the 4 and 5 range with a string of great episodes. It just had an alright ending and an outlier with the episode of the show that I enjoyed the least with the Everywhere Man. And lastly, Season 5 largely sat in the 3 category and had some exceptions with a higher score. It's definitely not Burnout that made me do this, though. I have always thought this was the least interesting season, even as a kid. But that is how I rank every episode of The Batman and The Batman vs. Dracula. Having rewatched a major part of my childhood and reviewing it, not having even watched it at all in the last 13 or so years, I can say I really enjoyed my time with it. It's not the greatest show DC animation ever produced, and it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I love the Batman for what it is. It's a fun and new take on Batman that was trying to be different for a new generation of Batman fans, and it definitely did the job. It was certainly a major part in my becoming a lifelong fan of The Dark Knight, and I owe the show a lot for that. The Justice League show got me interested in superheroes in general, and Batman was always one of my favorite characters on that show, but this one is focused on Batman, and him being so cool in it is a part of why I love the character so much. After this show wrapped up, I became super into The Brave and the Bold as it was coming out. I loved the Arkham games, I loved Batman the Animated Series and the DCAU it spawned, and I loved most of the Batman movies. He's just the perfect superhero to me, and this show is no exception in demonstrating that. To wrap up, this show and Teen Titans were big requests from my old DCAU retrospective fan base, so I have now covered them both pretty much back to back, and I hope you guys enjoyed them. Because I had fun making these. I don't have a big ending speech prepared for this series like I did Teen Titans, because there isn't much left to say. I thought this show was fun. I liked it more at the beginning and always have, but it's a good action-adventure show. If you set your expectations there, you'll probably enjoy it and fall in love with its cast of endearing characters. And there's not much more I can ask for when revisiting a childhood favorite. So with that said, here's to the next time I talk about a DC cartoon, whenever that will be. As always, I'll end by saying what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.